I think in the midst of an entrepreneur's journey, a pastor's journey, even a senior executive's journey, you know, I've been able to wear those hats in my life, and man, a lot of my counterparts were like, there was more loneliness than you would think, and some of it is self-created, some of it is because we thought that's what people wanted or had to want, but. You know, if I can encourage anyone, if you're in this, man, the biggest thing you can do sometimes is just encourage somebody. Keep a list of 5 people and just be like, you know what, once this week I'm gonna send a text to this, and then maybe you change that 5 out, or maybe you just keep encouraging that, but like, it takes almost no time. But to just let someone know they're not crazy. I love it. And 2, they're not alone. I think you find that real connection with each other. And I think on the midst of that journey, you know, it's not when you get there that you have the opportunity to encourage somebody. It's you should actually be able to do that in the midst of that. And that's my hope, I think, for people.
That's beautiful. Welcome to another episode of the web series Walk and Talk. I'm your host, Albert Baez, co-founder and COO. Today, we're walking on the beautiful grounds of the iconic Capitol building in downtown Austin, Texas. And we have our special guest here with us today, sales and growth expert, Pastor Chris Turnley.
Oh man, what a day.
I know.
I mean, we could not have dialed this thing up any better.
Absolutely, it's amazing. I'm so blessed and excited to have you with us this morning. Thank you for making the time. The goal here really is to give people a little bit of insight on what a sales and growth expert is, get to know you a little better, and then hopefully share some knowledge and inspiration with the world. So let's get started. Walk us through a day in the life. What's a sales and growth expert do?
You know, it's a great question. Some would say as little as possible, but really, I think if you line up where your strengths are, right? And over time, if you can begin to understand, Jim Collins touted this thing called best in the world. And it didn't mean you were gonna be the best in the world above everybody. It meant in this world, what are you the absolute best at, right? And so over time, you try and figure out what that thing is, and then spend as much of your time as you can doing that. And so I've combined 2 things. One is how do I help people grow? And then organizational growth is really a output of accumulated personal growth. And so whether that is a founder trying to come up with an idea, whether that is a team trying to scale and become global, whether that is somebody trying to make sure that they are impacting more lives than they've ever impacted, right? So you want to figure out, and there's just continual principles around growth. And what you continue to figure out is looking at the things that actually are growing and invest more in those. And then you look at the things that aren't growing and you lop them off and you go restart them. Doesn't mean they're dead forever, it just means like that envision's not working. So I spend most of my time looking at that, like what's working, what's not working. And a lot of what's not working is usually because it's not aligned. Right? And so there's a thing about seasons and there's a thing about timing. And so, you know, a lot of these great ideas that you're seeing come to fruition now were ideas people had 15, 20 years ago. Either the tech wasn't ready or the culture has changed over. And so you're seeing a lot of those things. So sometimes it's just recognizing also seasons. And are you in the right season, right wind to go?
Absolutely. I think recognizing challenges as opportunities, as a sales and growth expert, it's all about people, right? But what are those gaps that each individual has? Highlight those, improve upon those, and then see it at the macro level of a business.
I think it's also recognizing where opportunity really is for you to add value. Right? So, you know, my days vary a lot. You know, I get the opportunity to help lead nonprofits and ministries. I also have the pleasure of being the VP of retail for University Federal Credit Union and working with people financially. So the days may vary, but I think if you can begin to recognize what I tell people every time, every interaction, I think people have thought about winning that interaction, like I'm gonna get something and you're not gonna get something. When actually the real win is, am I providing value to you right now? Am I present right now? And when we think about growth, it's that, like, is that interaction, whether it's with a technology or whether it's with a person, providing value to that person that's having that interaction at that moment.
Yep.
And if you can continue to hone in on that,
Yep.
then growth happens.
Yep.
Right? What a lot of times happens, I think that people get stuck in, probably myself included at times, is when you fall in love with the solution that you're providing, but you haven't fully sold out to fall in love with the challenge that you're actually solving.
Yeah.
Right? So we a lot of times will be like, if I have a hammer, then everything I see is a nail,
Yeah.
right? So I have a hammer problem, right? Versus if I fall in love with these things, this house needs to get built.
Yep.
And it may take many tools. Some of them might be hammer problems, some of them might be screwdriver problems.
Yep.
And some of the tools I might have, and some of them I might need other people for. But I'm so in love with trying to solve this issue that I'm willing to invest or sacrifice differently.
Yeah.
Then that'll change, because any founder, you guys know, you guys go through it.
Yeah.
It didn't look exactly like you thought it was going to look even a year ago, right?
Not at all.
And so I think, but if you're in love with the challenge and you're in love with bringing people around that challenge, and if you're really in a great spot, you'll actually fall in love with the people you're doing it with.
Yeah.
And then you're like, wow, we're in this to see what this is, but it's okay if this one way of doing it doesn't work, because we're gonna stay nimble. And I think that's where
Present, just being in the moment.
and acknowledging that it's okay in the moment if it didn't work out like I thought.
Yeah.
And that may not be failure, right? People talk a lot of times about fail forward and this, and I think everyone wants to do that.
Yeah.
I think in the moment when you realize the thing you're working on isn't working,
Yeah. Well, and we care about it, right? We
right.
put our hearts to it.
and you've invested, you've sacrificed for it, and you're like, like, and then that moment kicks in where you're like, hey, are we really going to dig in on this? And I think the way I think about it probably is like I have a belief that every person was born with a specific purpose. Absolutely. That God had given everybody a purpose to their life. And that purpose might get fulfilled through a company, but that purpose isn't a company, if that makes sense. So I think so often they will look at, people will fall in love with that, like, no, but this is my thing. Like, this is the thing I was born to do. And it might be, but it may get fulfilled through anything else. So I think I try and line up so much with my time with what is that purpose that I'm actually here to fulfill. And the companies can change, and some companies, I've just been an investor in, some companies I've just had the idea, some companies I've helped build, some companies I came in 40, 50 years into their existence, right? And you're just like, hey, for this season, what's my, how can I help people grow?
Put the WD-40 on it.
Right, and just to fulfill that purpose in that time. And so I think those things vary, but if I locked my identity to anything other than the purpose God's given me,
I love that.
then I think I'm gonna hold on to it too tightly. And that might, and so for some people, their purpose might be they built something and it lasts in the community for their whole life, 60 years. But that doesn't mean it was mine, and it doesn't mean mine was theirs. And so a lot of times I think just getting really comfortable and tuned into what that purpose is.
I've in this season, I feel, startup land and tech boom. There's been stages of it, but the last 2 or 3 years, really, a lot of people made that leap of faith and jump into trying to start something. And I feel like the ones that are maybe hitting a wall or crashing are battling with that identity issue, right? Of like identifying with what they built and not understanding that.
Because you got to put yourself out there. I mean, I remember the first time back in the late 90s when we were starting to build companies, and no one knew what we were talking about. They were, now I think, I don't know if it made it easier or harder, to be honest with you. Because back then, an idea, everyone would rally around and they'd get excited, and there was some money for it,
now
depending on that.
And
Well, now people are more expected to be something real sooner. And that's probably good. I mean, but it also makes it harder at your stage, because you have this thing that you love and this vision you can see, but you go in and people are like, I don't know. Like, I mean, so they literally be like, I don't know really if that's a good thing or not. And you're like, wait, no, don't you see? And they're like, I kind of see it. So depending on the metric that they're looking at, but you're right, if you know enough, you hear some of these stories and someone will hear, I got 200 no's. And you got to think, how much do you have to believe in what you're doing to hear that multiple times, where people say, well, you should pivot to this, or you should pivot to this.
Yep.
And are you resolute in the problem you're trying to solve, and that they may not have that perspective?
Yeah.
I think that really matters, because I agree with you. The ones I think have jumped into it, thought it was either going to be easy or easier, or that more people were going to come around, or more people were going to fall in love with the solution. Sometimes God allows you to see something that no one else sees, and maybe your job is to introduce them to that, but not so much that they're going to carry the, if God hands you something to carry, it's not really for anyone else to carry it. He gave it to you. And so often we want to go, oh, don't you get it? And don't you get it? He's like, no, I gave that burden to you so that you can do something about it. So you start to gather people around. And a lot of times I think we look, especially you're a young guy, like you're just starting this thing, and you and your wife are doing amazing things. At the same time, there's always this feeling of like, shouldn't there be an adult in the room? I remember when we were starting a church one time, and here in Austin, it's a great church. They're doing amazing things. At the same time, we would, there were times where we would look around going, well, shouldn't someone serious show up here pretty soon? Because if they don't, man, we could be in trouble. But we had to come realize, like, God had put this on us at that time. And I think even as we think about growth, and people are thinking about like, what do I do? There's times where you need to move, but usually things grow where you water them. So true. So a lot of times, even if it is a move, or whether it's a stay in one place or whatever that is, I would just really encourage people to be like, are you watering where you are? Right? Not looking over there, not looking over there, not looking over there, but you're really intentional with, man, I'm really investing in, you talked about the word present before. I think that's such an important word anymore. I'd say in 2020, the authenticity and being present are probably the two most powerful things you can bring into a room. To be really cognizant with this person at that time, and then to be your true self and not trying to put on someone else's clothes, because there's so much pressure to do that. And
your hugs are the cornerstone of present.
I think God gives everybody a gift, and if He's just giving me that one, and we can just let people know that they're not alone. Man, I think in the midst of an entrepreneur's journey, a pastor's journey, even a senior executive's journey, I've been able to wear those hats in my life, and man, a lot of my counterparts were like, there was more loneliness than you would think, and some of it is self-created, some of it is because we thought that's what people wanted or had to want. But if I could encourage anyone, if you're in this, man, the biggest thing you can do sometimes is just encourage somebody. Keep a list of 5 people and just be like, you know what, once this week I'm going to send a text to this, and then maybe you change that 5 out, or maybe you just keep encouraging that. But like, it takes almost no time. But to just let someone know they're not crazy. I love it. And 2, they're not alone. I think you find that real connection with each other. And I think on the midst of that journey, it's not when you get there that you have the opportunity to encourage somebody. You should actually be able to do that in the midst of that. And that's my hope, I think, for people as we do it. And then if we're going to come down to like growth, like, hey, what do we do to grow? Man,
how do you apply growth?
That's a good question. Man, there's lots of things, but I think a lot of it comes down to having some theories and testing. And being willing to put it out there in a way that you're willing to hear no. What I mean by that is, not enough small companies, I think, just go market. And they're like, well, let's go hire salespeople, let's go do this, let's go. And they invest in something, well then that better work, right? And so I'm just gonna keep making that work versus, do people actually want to buy this? Are people interested? I know we created the world's greatest pickle in a jar, but do people even want that, or do they want something else? And once I've invested so much in the outcome, but and then it's just continually getting better. The funny thing about growth is you'll be talking about it 30 years from now, right? You're like, it's the constant conversation of how do we continue to grow? Either that's growing closer, growing tighter, growing in effectiveness, or growing revenue, right? The principles aren't necessarily different. It's where are you investing, where are you watering, and what are you measuring? And I think just making sure, I think that's the tough part for small companies. It's hard sometimes to have the tools, but there's so many more tools out there to measure stuff early on. They're like, is this actually working the way we thought it would work? And is it not because we didn't invest enough in it, so we need to double down? Or is it not because it's actually the wrong theory? And I think those honest, but I'll go back to, if you don't have people you trust in the midst of those conversations, then people won't tell you the truth. They'll be like, no, this is great. And you're like, really? Because it doesn't seem to be, but their job's dependent on it because they just view you that way. And eventually every company gets to size where some people just come to work for you, right? But if you do it right, I've been part of multiple companies where they're significant in size, but that passion, that purpose, people actually amplify it versus, so what you think you could do as one person is actually amplified by 1,000 versus coming in and saying like, oh, I need to carry that ball all the time. And if you do it right, that's what you get. If you don't, like culture, they talk about culture eating strategy for breakfast. It's true. Like you really want to look back and say, did I build something I actually don't even like at the end of it because we cut corners? Because if you cut corners, then you're the company that cuts corners. Like people want to define themselves as
exposed at some point.
Well, we care. It's just the decisions you make. So if you make that decision, then you are defined by, I guess we just are that. Or people are like, hey, well, we don't measure stuff. We don't yet, but we're going to be that. And you're like, well, right now, then you're just a culture of company that doesn't measure stuff. And so that is that. And if people say, hey, people are all there is, or people are our most important asset, you'd be like, do you back that up? And if you do, man, that will give you returns for years and years and years. Even if it doesn't work out with every individual, how I treat them coming in, how we treat them coming out, and do we honor that person for the time and investment that they're giving us?
That's amazing. Oh, thank you so much.
Oh man, absolutely, man. This is the best stuff. Best stuff we're doing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for watching another episode of Walk and Talk. Be sure to follow us on blendedsense.com, blendedsense.io, and shoot us an email if you're looking to be featured on the next episode at hello@blendedsense.com, subject line, Walk and Talk. Until next time.